We are continuing the conversation between myself, Suzanne Wagner, and Alorah Inanna, and we are going to be diving deeper into the conversation of the difference between sexuality and sensuality. And I think this is such an important conversation to have right now, especially in Western world, because I think that these two get very, very confused. And so, Alorah, let's hear what your perception is.
Okay. Well, I want to apologize in advance if there's background noise because I am in a hotel. In the future, we'll be doing some of these, and you'll see my beautiful wall hanging of a temple that is usually behind me, and I love. But at any rate, so hopefully there's not too much background noise. I know what for me is a very clear distinction between sensuality and sexuality, and it makes it so there's no question really, and that is liquid. If it's liquid, it's sexual. If it's not liquid, it's sensual. So, you know, the moment that the tongue gets involved, what I say is there's a chemical reaction with that tongue, and the tongue says, I know where this goes, let's go. And it starts pushing towards a genital focus. So I don't care what you're doing with that tongue. The minute the tongue's in there, you're in the world of sex. So I could have told Bill Clinton he was in the world of sex. But not that I think he shouldn't have been. You know, frankly, in the old days, the kings are the most vital men, and they deserve and need feminine Shakti. And I don't think Hillary was upset about it. I just think our conservative world was upset about it, but truthfully they weren't that upset. It was really interesting to find out that, you know, ultimately we loved him and love him as one of the best presidents we had, or at least many people would say that. And I think that their marriage has been a remarkable marriage. And let's just say that so many people are still so suffering from the fact that monogamy, as most people practice it, is not really delivering the kind of vital relationships that we need. And I also think that polyamory, which is the word that's used to apply to people who are in many loves at one time, is a challenging path, because sexuality does attach us to each other. And if you are in a marriage and you find somebody else that you're powerfully sexually attracted to and you engage that, you are going to often have a divided reality. So this is why I feel it's so wonderful to distinguish sensuality from sexuality and start expanding how we engage sensually, because much of what we need can get filled through that without having to go into the more tricky waters of actual sexuality with more than one person. So, you know, I'm kind of jumping into the deep waters of the conversation, but what I want to say is that my belief is that what women need more than anything is more freedom to be sensuous in their lives, and that the best way for women to bond is to be sensuous beauty together. Nothing bonds women more fully than, you know, you can sit down and talk at a coffee shop, and what are you going to talk about? You're going to talk about your job or your kids or men for the most part. And all of those conversations, we've all heard them before. We've all told our story a million times. There's nothing new in it, and it doesn't create real bonding. It actually often, or it bonds us through sometimes the negative perceptions we have about men, or the suffering we're doing in our mothering or our job, whatever. But so my feeling is what women need more than anything is to have a place where they can go to be sensuous beauty with women is easy. That's the start. It's like, in my work with women, one of the very first things that I do is have them get down on the floor back to back and begin to move with each other in ways that feed their body with all the kinds of touch that it hasn't been getting. It's really not about going for the erogenous zones. Those have, they do get attention, and they often, it's complicated. There's a complicated parts of our bodies, the emotions and everything that get evoked. But sensuality is so much more than any attention on your, genitals or your breasts. It's really a whole experience of movement and connection that you can share with another person. And when women start doing that, it creates a friendship that is different than any other friendship. And I just think that we are, the problem is because we've got intimacy and sensuality and sexuality all collapsed together, you don't think you can be intimate or sensuous with someone without it implying that you're open to sexuality. So that collapsing has locked us into the idea that we can only do that with a partner. For most women, that means that partner needs to be male. For most women, they don't have that male partner in their life. And even if they do, he doesn't really want to do those things anyway. So women just live lives where there's very little real sensuous expression in their lives. And as I said to you earlier, they turn to food because it's one of the few places that the body can get pleasure that the society says is okay. And it's very interesting because that is producing a whole lot of health issues in the long run. The more you do that, the more your body doesn't have ways to handle that, and then it turns into dis-ease in the body, and then, so what we were talking, see, all these things tie together. We were talking about marijuana and why marijuana is illegal. Well, if you really look from the actual story of it, which I'm sure you know, but basically cannabis there was no such thing as marijuana. That's a word that got invented in the 30s as a part of a intentional program to discredit that plant. But cannabis was just part of people's lives. It was, the Constitution was written on hemp. Shirts were made out of hemp. Porridge had the seeds of cannabis in it. It was just part of our lives. And nobody really knew what they were voting against when they voted against marijuana, because marijuana was a word that was invented to start calling attention to the plant in an ignorant way and say that, it was basically an economic conspiracy. You know this, right? You're aware of this fact? Yeah, so it was an economic conspiracy because there was a way to harvest hemp that became competitive with cotton. Before that, hemp was a hard thing to harvest, so it really wasn't competitive. But once we had a machine, a decorticator that could do it quickly, all of a sudden that threatened everything. That threatened the cotton industry, that threatened the paper industry, and it threatened the plastic industry, because those three things can all be made from the cannabis plant. So really it's an economic conspiracy that caused and it happened right when Prohibition ended, and all that infrastructure that had been doing Prohibition, they got employed to now turn on to the war on drugs. It was just a refunding of that of that industry. And the other piece of it is it was a very racist thing. It was basically playing on our fear of Mexicans and black people and saying that, cannabis caused the rape of white women. It was just so horrible to look at what was done in the name. Here's this plant that I believe is an expression of the divine feminine. And so when we're talking about what is the divine feminine, that's another question. What up till recent times, the divine feminine has basically been the image of of Mary, Mother Mary, who is supposed to be a virgin birth, right? So the divine feminine was a virgin mother. That was all that has been held up by our church for the Christian religion for a very, very long time. So fortunately, now we have Mary Magdalene coming, once with the discovery of the Gnostic Gospels and the actual language of Mary Magdalene speaking. I'm reading a book right now, which is a book written by a woman who is, I don't know if I have it with me, but let me just see in this purse if it happens to be here. Yeah, let's look at this book. This book was given to me by the same man who told me about you. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Tim Blake. And this is The Meaning of Mary Magdalene, Discovering the Woman at the Heart of Christianity by Cynthia Bourgeot. And she is a scholar, a Christian scholar. It's not an easy read. It's actually a very scholarly read.
Right.
But, you know, the Mary Magdalene Gospel is written, it was written closer to Jesus's actual time than the later Gospels that we've got. So it's actually a more accurate version, not written 400 or 500 years later, but written within the first 100 years or something of his death. So anyway, that whole issue of how do we see I feel that with the advent of Judeo-Christian morality, women, the fall of, this story that Adam and Eve is the source of the fall of man, that has done so much damage to women's psyches. We can't even begin, and not just women's, the whole world's psyche has been horribly distorted by that, and the relationship between spirituality and sexuality has been broken. And that break, I believe, is the fundamental dis-ease in personal relationships, in family violence, in social violence, all of it. So to restore the right relationship between spirituality and sexuality, and also at the same time allow that sexuality is not just genital. I mean, when I say liquid makes it sexual, I'm talking about if you want to distinguish sensuality from sexuality, that's the distinction. But in a bigger sense, our sexual energy is our vital force, and we can express it through our sensuality in a beautiful way that lets us play with our sisters, lets us get that. Remember, I was saying that so few women even have a man in their life, or if they do, he's not somebody who wants to get down on the floor and roll around with you. And yet, so could you get together with your women friends and meet your needs to be in your body, and to remember, you talked about women, you used the word informed, something about being informed, and I as you heard it, I heard that word for the very first time, and I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? Inform, we learn by things going into our bodies. Until you experience it in your body, it's a concept. This is the difference that I believe has happened when we went from a goddess-based concept of the divine to a God-based concept of the divine. Because in the goddess-based concept, there were temples and there were sacred sexual rituals that the people got to go through that gave them an embodied experience of spirit. And in the embodied experience of spirit, there is no doubt of the spirit. But when you sit in a church and you get a concept of spirit, that's a different thing. And that's why I think that churches, for the most part, and certainly in the Christian world, I don't know about Judaism, but I'm not happy with them for having kept women out of the temples for however long they did. So I don't really think that they're in better shape. I think they do have maybe a little healthier relationship with sexuality than the Christian religion, but nevertheless, I'm not so sure that they have a great relationship with the feminine. So before Judeo-Christian morality, there was a more holistic experience of the unity between spirituality and sexuality, and I do think we have to get back to that so that we can have an embodied experience of sexuality instead of just a concept and somebody that. And when you have an embodied experience, you don't have to have an intermediary between you and the divine. You feel it in your body. And that's why you know, as a dancer, you'll know this for sure. Like some of my most profound experiences of spirit have come through movement. Because, like you said, women, see, the masculine is going to go to spirit through stillness, the feminine is going to go through movement. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and that's what I've always known, you know, for myself too. It was like I felt more like I could channel something, and I would actually have powerful spiritual experiences when I was performing. There was a particular ballet that I did that there was actually a moment where I actually was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, this is such a difficult ballet. I mean, I'm not sure I can do this, and I need help. And I said, I ask for the divine goddess of dance to come help me. And literally the next thing I knew, something was in my body. And I was having sort of a disembodied experience of it, but I was sort of there but not there. And this goddess, you know, came in, and she did things on stage that I never was able to do. I mean, never, ever. And at the end of the show, she took one curtain call, and then I was fully back in my body. And the choreographer ran back because it was opening night, and the choreographer said to me, "Oh my God, who was that? That was not you." Like, even the choreographer knew it wasn't me. And I told her what had happened, and she goes, oh my God, let's go get the video. You know, and you have to remember, you know, back in the 1980s, videos weren't very good, but we went and turned and rewound the video, and you could hear the music, but the moment I stepped on stage, the whole video went white.
You're
And so there was
kidding.
no record of this goddess coming down.
Oh, that makes me so sad. I wanted to see it. I mean, it's kind of perfect in its own way, you know.
Yeah,
But
and so
wow.
to me, it's like that whole process, like for me, that connection was so strong between dance and movement, and the sensuality of the divine feminine. And, you know, like, you know, I have like a memory of past lives being like a geisha. And in being a geisha, you know, what happened was that, you know, you kind of started out like they taught you how to sing, and then they taught you to play music.
Mm-hmm.
And then they taught you to dance, because it was literally different stages of development that you had to learn to lift your voice out, and then you had to learn, you know, how to open hearts or break hearts open with music. And then you had to learn to embody that music by dancing and moving. And only then were you taught the sexual arts. Like there was actually a progression that needed happen, that you had to embody all these levels in order to open. And so, you know, in this day and age with the divine feminine, you know, we're in this place where, you know, we're sitting in chairs all day, and we're on computers all day, and you don't get out, and you don't move, and you don't get in touch with that sensuality. And then sometimes, unfortunately, in our relationships, in a sexual sense, we're in a rush. We don't take the time. We don't slow down. And what I find is that the feminine is really the power in the domain of sexuality. I mean, it's really the feminine that is in control of this domain. We are of the earth. We are of nature. You know, we are of movement, and it's our sensuality that then informs the masculine, and we have this capacity to show men a level of depth in sexuality and sensuality, but if we can't embody it, they can't experience it or know where to go. So one of the reasons I do this Wild Women Symposium is because it's amazing how when you give women permission to embody, and they start to feel their emotions, and the moment they feel their emotions, those emotions shift. And when they shift, they actually deepen into their sensuality naturally. But when you're not allowed to express your emotions, you get tighter and tighter and tighter. And the moment you're allowed to express those emotions and cry and scream and yell, this innate natural sensuality just automatically comes forth in women. And it's startling to them. You know, I mean, to you and me, it's not startling, because we know that that's the door. But when you haven't done it, it's a shock.
I love that whole story, and I totally, you know, I couldn't agree more. It's like this would take us into a conversation which we're going to have, but probably this will just be a touch of it. But I received this symbol called the Mary Magdalene Yantra. And if you can imagine the Star of David, which I didn't know I was drawing when it came, I only realized later that's what it was. But in the triangle that's pointing up, this is wealth, this is sex, and this is spirit. And I saw, oh, this is the way that it is in life, is that when you feel that your survival needs are handled, your energy flows to sexuality. Wealth does go there. That's why the porn industry is so successful. We want to go to pleasure. The second chakra is pleasure. The first chakra is survival. When that one's handled, the next one is pleasure. And we want to go there. And when we go there, and it's an educated experience, when you have a geisha school, when you learn how to be the vehicle as a woman to take that sexual energy and take it to spirituality, that's perfect. And then you have an embodied experience of spirit, which makes you feel well and wealthy. Do you see how that goes? It's just like the flowers. I said, okay, in the garden, the bees are the wealth of the garden. Without the bees, nothing lives. So the bees are the wealth of the garden. They put their attention on the scent and the color of the flowers. That's the sex of the garden. That brings new life to the garden. That's the spirit of the garden. That attracts more bees to the garden. That's how it's supposed to go. And what we've done is, when we broke that connection between spirit and sex, when that got broken, everything went into opposition. And you have good girls don't do that. And you have wealth and spirit having nothing to do with each other. They don't seem to have any relationship. And then ironically, the most interesting piece is that the relationship between wealth and sexuality becomes an illegal relationship. You see, I always say, tell me anything else you can do as much as you want, and you'll get judged, but you won't get jailed. But if you charge for it, you'll get jailed, right? Like, I could have sex with 10 men a day. I'd get judged, but I wouldn't get jailed. But charge something for it, I can get jailed, right? And it's going to be me, not him. Now, why is that? Well, that is because what actually happened when that unity got broken is that wealth and sexuality went into a relationship where you can't there's no place anymore where you can go with honor to receive sexual attention, sexual instruction, sexual healing, none of that, right? But now we're going to sell all these symbols of sex, and we're going to use your sex to sell them, and we're going to say, if you buy that clothes or that car or that diamond ring, you're going to get that sex, but you won't. So now we have a system that is built on an addiction to producing and consuming goods that we don't need, selling them with sex, women manipulating with their sexuality to get wealth, men manipulating with their wealth to get sex, and the whole thing is horrifying, and is exactly where we are today.
Well, and I think this is such a really important conversation. I have this conversation a lot, that with women, it's so hard because of the Adam and Eve story and how women, got pushed down because of the cultural conditionings that have gone on for 2,000 years, and that for us to own our sensuality, but not only to own it, but to own the power of it. And I actually do it as an exercise that, my husband laughs at me because I'll get dressed up to go to the grocery store, right? and I'm getting dressed up to go to the grocery store because what I recognize and what I want to practice is similar to you, that embodying. It's like, I know that my feminine radiance and beauty can make a man's day. Mm-hmm. And it's not sexual again, it's sensual. That my radiance and light will enliven him and lift him up and open him. And it's always so cute because I go to the grocery store and it's like, two men, at least two men, will come up to me almost every time, and just they kind of fall all over themselves with words, like, because when there's so much radiance and light hitting them, men can't talk, right? So they just, like, they lose their ability to communicate, and so they'll just be like, I just need to tell you that it's just so incredibly wonderful to see a woman who wants to look beautiful and wants to be in her feminine, and you're just beautiful, like they're just like, and it's so sweet and it's so authentic, and it's not like they're coming on to me, but the reason they're not coming on to me is because I'm owning the power of it. Right?
That's right.
That's an important distinction, because women think that if I dress beautifully, then they're going to come on to me. Well, if you don't believe in the power of your feminine, and you don't own that it's your choice, and if you don't own that you know that you are more powerful than them emotionally, energetically, and sexually, and that you are gifting them with your light, but most men couldn't handle you on any day anyway, and if you have this internal attitude, then men will override you. That they'll go into that dominance game. And so I so want to empower women that to know that they know their beauty, they know their emotions, they know their sensuality, they know they're fabulous. And just like you and I both know probably that I'm not every man's cup of tea. I'm clearly not every man's cup of tea. Not every man is going to like what my energy offers, and that's what's beautiful. There is a garden full of flowers, and if you like red better than blue, go for it. Do you know what I mean? But that doesn't diminish my light or my beauty or your light or your beauty.
Absolutely. Very, very fun. I didn't really know, maybe you did in our session the other day, the alignment, but I didn't know it, and it's very fun to find it out. I want to add something important there. I'll never forget the day that I got this, and it was probably 1998. This was a very powerful year for me. And I had a woman who'd been in by that time I was leading a program called The Call of the Goddess. And it was a 6-month program where I would have women come together one Thursday night for an overnight and an all-day together. There were 8 of them. And then every Monday night they would be on the Call of the Goddess. So it was an experiential conference call. They had to get dressed, freshly showered, get in their sacred space, tell no husband, no kids, this is my time. And I would greet them with music and a meditation, and we would go to the Island of the Goddess together, and we would read and study and talk, and every woman would check in every week about how her life was changing as she began to really own her feminine nature. So this woman had been in my program for a couple of years. She had done the program, and then she was assisting in every other program, and she was a particularly beautiful young woman. And we were going wind dancing, and we were going, although I rarely did it, but we were going to a nude beach in Northern California. So she was willing to get down to her bikini bottoms, but she just didn't feel like she could take those off, and she said, and I didn't care, she could do what she wanted, I wasn't trying to get her to, but she said, I just feel like the men will just like glom me, right? And I thought about it, and I thought, well, what's my experience? And I said, this is what my experience is that when men know you have radiance, and when you hold it inside and you walk through them and you don't acknowledge their attention and you pull in like that, they know that you're withholding it and you're going to give it to somebody, and it actually causes aggression. They will actually want to be the one that you give it to, so it will cause aggression. But what I do is I go out and I just give it to whoever's there. I just be the beauty. I let them watch, and my givingness protects me. They don't want to take it. I'm giving it away. I'm giving all that radiance away. Why would they need to come and get it? It doesn't. You see what I'm saying? The withhold actually causes the aggression.
Right.
So isn't that interesting? And but I never thought of it the way you said it, which is also that they need to realize that they are I don't know. I never thought about the fact that, the fear causes male dominance. I didn't really see that piece before. I'll have to look at that one a little bit more.
Well, and also, I mean, many years ago, before, was a little bit more educated about the divine feminine. So when I was younger, I remember being in the city that I was living in, and I was in this park, and it was that classic thing that I'm walking, in the park, and, some gentlemen that were, and I'm not being culturally bad, but it was like they were Hispanic, and they were in the car, and, they, started coming at me, and saying, "Hi, mamacita, come on, baby doll," it's like, "Come on," and, and it was, and I went, I went into fear, and I contracted, and they came at me like wolves. And it was very alarming. It was like, oh my God. And that was actually one of the first places that I went, I'm doing something wrong. I need to do something different. I don't know what this is, but I need to do something different. So I started doing work on looking at the divine feminine and what did that actually mean. And I learned about the power of the feminine, and I suddenly realized that I'm emotionally, energetically, and sexually more powerful than men. And that's what the feminine is. And so what I did was I just started owning it. And then, of course, as irony has it, as you know, the universe always tests your ability, after you've figured out you've learned something. So a few years later, I was at the exact same part, at the exact same place. I mean, it's funny how you get these loops in life, right? And the same thing happened again. And these young men were, in a car, and hey, mamacita, da 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 da. And this time, I just dropped into my feminine. I started swishing my hips, and I just said, I just laughed, and I said, "Oh, boys, problem is that I could take all of you on. I mean, it's like, you would just be wasted by the time I was done with you, right?" And I just owned the power of my sexuality, and they left because the meeting was over, right? I had given them the gift of my radiance. I'd owned my power, and they knew it was true. They couldn't handle me, right?
That's right. That's right. Very cool. Very fun. Very perfect. That's a wonderful story. I'm going to retell that story because I've never had that. I've never had that happen. But what I've always done with what you're talking about is, when men whistle, I wave, and people tell me. I'll tell you what. It's very interesting. I have never been given so much appreciation for my beauty in my life as I am now. It's constant, and it's not just men, it's women and men. It's a constant thing because I am going out in the world, as you say, all the time in my goddess. I'm living this energy, and it's so missing, and it's so wanted, and it's part of being the goddess of wildness and permission. I've created a fashion line, which you can't really see here, but it's a way of wrapping. It's nothing that's sewn. It's a timeless way of wrapping yourself, and you end up looking like a goddess. I can change a woman from a 21st century woman into a goddess in less than 5 minutes doing this, and it's so fun because it's a huge experience. I'm going to see if I can actually show you something, which is of teens, that was so cool. But anyway, while I'm looking for this, I'll keep telling this story.
Well, and you and I were having this conversation before, but because my husband works in India, and so he bought me this absolutely beautiful designer sari, and as the Indian ladies were helping me get into the sari, because there's a specific way you do it, right? They were just like, "Oh, what is beautiful about a sari is that it's so forgiving." Right? And it's so feminine that every woman looks beautiful wrapped in 5 yards of fabric, right? It's just a beautiful thing. And I love that, you're perpetuating that in sort of more of an American style.
I call it American sari half the time because 5 yards is a lot. I'm working with mostly 3 or 2.5. And it's freer. There's a confinement in movement, I believe, in the sari that's different. But this is just a modern version, and it's true. I mean, can you see this image very well?
Yeah, I can see that.
These are 2 teens, right? And they're in jeans.
Pull it back a little bit. Pull it back a little bit. Yeah, and lift it up just a smidge. Okay, there we go.
Can you see these 2 teens?
Yeah.
And within less than 5 minutes, these were those teens.
Wow, how beautiful.
Isn't that beautiful? And they talk. I have it on film, what they say about it. It's like the thin one said, I have self-esteem issues. And she said, when I saw myself like this for the first time, I felt beautiful. And she cried. She had never seen her beauty before. And the other girl has large breasts, and she said, you know, I'm thick. And she said, even though I have a flat stomach, it's hard to find clothes that don't have me just look blop. And she said, when I saw myself in this, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got curves, I've got definition. And she said, I feel like I can go out and take on the world. So there's a wonderful transformation that happens when you do start stepping out of the clothes that society's giving us to wear right now, which are not feminine, really. I mean, I can go on that conversation for a long time, because basically you're climbing into a structure that somebody invented, and it doesn't conform to your body. When you're wrapped, it conforms to your body. And the other fun thing about that is that, you know, if you're wearing a skirt and a shirt and I'm wearing a dress, I can't say to you, how did you do that? And all we can do is contrast and compare what we're wearing, right? Whose is better, whose is more modern, whose is the latest style, all that stuff. That's what's happened with fashion.
Yeah.
When you do fashion, I say the minute we went into sewing like a machine, you start measuring minutes and money. Before that, you're not measuring minutes and money. You know, you may be saying, God, Michelangelo, how long are you taking? But you're not tracking the minutes that he's taking. But once you have a machine, you can measure that. So that's when that went really awry. But if you are in a wrap and I'm in a wrap, I can say, how'd you do that? You show me, and it bonds us again. So bonding through this whole new way of dressing that makes you connect to your goddess nature, the goddess archetype. This is really what I think comes back over and over again, is where we're saying how important it is to reclaim the archetype in yourself of you as a divine feminine being. How does that affect your sexuality? How does that affect your relationships? How does that affect what you do for work and what you do with your life force? Those are the issues that you and I are both so passionately addressing.
Yeah, well, and I remember when I was in my 20s, and I'm 54 now, I was in a personal growth workshop, and there was a sweat lodge that was had a skylight, and so, which was unusual because most sweat lodges are pitch dark, right?
Right.
And so, and in the sweat lodge, you go in naked, and so I'm in the sweat lodge, and so you can see the other women, and you can absolutely, and I was in my 20s, and I'm not very body conscious because I'm being a ballet dancer. So it's like, you've had dressers dressing you and, costumers sticking pins all over the place. And so you kind of get over the body issue very quickly. But so I don't have an issue with my body, but there was a woman who was in there who was, she was curvaceous. She was, as we would say in German, saftig. She was very curvy. And in clothes, she looked horrible. And naked, she was fabulous. She was totally fabulous. And the women, of course, are saying to me, because I had the ballerina body at that point, like, oh my gosh, I wish I had your body, blah, blah, blah. And I actually turned it around. I said, okay, wait a second. You know what? She, who is Zoftig, she has more femininity in her little finger than I've got in my whole body. I feel like a piece of wood next to her. And I said to her, you are coming to my room and we are opening our suitcases, and ladies, we are going to dress her because she is not dressing in a way that enhances these beautiful curves. And so, we kind of on our own version did our own thing because, we all had saris, not saris, but we had like the scarves, long scarves and stuff. And so, we created like a skirt out of all these long scarves and, wrapped her around in them. And, and all of a sudden she was this fluid, moving, beautiful thing. And what was so amazing about it was that she said that she had already lost 100 pounds and she had another 70 pounds to lose. And so I said to her, you're dancing with me. So, we have, in personal growth workshops, they do a lot of dancing. So I was dancing with her. And again, women show other women how to move. And I'm really good at like showing a woman how to find her own organic movement within herself, because I also give a lot of permission in movement. Yeah. And so she started moving and flowing. And she was like, oh my gosh, she said, Suzanne, she said, I feel more amazing than I've ever felt in my whole life. And then the irony was that about a year later, I went on a very difficult hike up to a set of caves. And as I was coming down, I see this woman coming, and we're meeting on the trail, and my heart recognized her, though my eyes couldn't put it together because she'd lost 70 more pounds. Wow. And she looked so different. And yet my heart knew her, like my heart blew open, and I totally recognized her. And I kept looking at her like, I know you. And I kept looking at her, and she goes, Suzanne, it's me. And I'm like, oh my God. And the moment she opened her mouth and I heard her voice, I knew who it was. And I was like, oh my God, you are so gorgeous. And she said, you taught me how to be beautiful. You taught me to embrace my beauty. And that made me so happy, because I'm like you. It's like, I want women to see their beauty, their own innate beauty that's right there, even if it's curvaceous, and yeah. And so it's sort of like we're all trying. I mean, there isn't a woman out there that doesn't have elements of body consciousness at some point in their life, but there's that place where you have to evolve beyond it, and you have to kind of just recognize that I am beautiful. I was made this way. The divine goddess made me this way for some reason, and I am perfect, and the people who resonate with my frequency will get it.
Yeah, very much so. I love that story. And I often see that every body that is, quote, heavy is more beautiful when it's freed of the constrictions that bras make bumps and pants make bumps, and there's all these bumps which aren't there if you take all that off, right? So it's particularly valuable for the more full-bodied woman to be able to own. I mean, I have a girlfriend who is her body doesn't fit our images of what it should look like, but she is so in that body, and she's so at home in that body. She's one of the sexiest women I know, and she's having a very good time with that body. She's way farther than you. She plays in a world that's way beyond where I play, because I'm just not so interested. I'm interested in sensuality more than I am exploring sexuality. But she's a remarkable woman. She's has a very happy marriage, remarkable person in her marriage. I've never seen anybody caretake a marriage so much and be sure her husband is in great shape. He's 30 years older than her, so he just turned 80. She just turned 50. He's potent and sexual. She's amazing, but she's definitely a polyamorous woman, and she plays in a world I don't even touch. So pretty interesting. And body image is not stopping her.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I love this conversation. I think this is a really fascinating one, and I am looking forward to our continued journey into the conversation of femininity, the divine feminine, sexuality, sensuality, permission, wildness. I'm sure we have a lot more places we can go with this. So we'll close for now, and I will talk to you again very soon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Oops, did I